I think self is a survival. It's a self-survival instinct. Self is only about saving itself. It's a sense of really being located inside the body. And some selves, mostly introverts, have a sense that they live inside their head.
Oh yeah, behind
And
the eyes.
yeah, right here.
Uh-huh.
That's the third eye. That's me. You know, this I really think that's because that's where I reside. That's where self lives. But then for a lot of extroverts, they don't live in their heads, they live in their bodies. So then in the heart or in the solar plexus. So nothing stays the same. I really like that phrase. Nothing stays the same.
Yeah, literally.
Literally, that's one of my favorite phrases. I,
Nothing stays the same.
that could be a title for a book. I really like that because everything changes, nothing stays the same.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say there's no duality. So dualistically, everything changes relatively. Absolutely, nothing doesn't change. Good
Hello,
morning.
Tim.
Good morning.
Wonderful to meet you.
Lovely to meet you too.
Hi, everyone. Today I'm speaking to Tim Cliss. He is a non-duality teacher, author of a couple of books, and the new one is coming out very soon. And the first book is called This Deafening Silence. Very curious
So,
name for it.
deliberately very mystical.
Yeah. And the second book is Empty Poems of This Love.
Yeah.
Which also sounds very mystical.
It does, doesn't it?
And do you have the name for the third book?
I'm looking for a very mystical and intriguing title for my new book. I think it's going to be called Doubtless Uncertainty, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I thought it would be interesting. Anything paradoxical is interesting.
Yeah, wonderful. I have seen your posts on Facebook for a long time now. And they
Yeah.
always just like a little breeze of fresh air out of all the noise into this simplicity.
Oh, thanks. That's
Yeah,
love.
so
Well, if they have that effect, then that's great. Um, hmm. Yeah, I suppose I've been doing that. It's kind of like it's where I do journaling, kind of. I don't think, oh, I'll post on Facebook. There's a thought, and then I this was years ago, probably 5 years ago, 6 years ago. I didn't know where to put the thoughts, so I started putting them on Facebook, and I've carried on doing that, really.
Well, it's a good place, because you go on Facebook and
I
it says,
just think,
what is
well,
on your mind?
and it's just nice to put it down rather than just have the thought and think of the thought. Because once it's put down, it's kind of the end of it. There is the act of I think physically writing it by hand is even better, but I started doing it on Facebook and I like it. And it's appreciated by quite a lot of people as well, which is always lovely. Like you say, if it's a breath of fresh air, then I would say not all my posts are like that, but I would think quite a lot of them are.
Good. Well, welcome to the podcast. And it's called Awakening Now. So before we get into all this awakening topic, I would like to ask your definition of awakening. What is awakening? Awakening from what to what? Who's awakening? What's awakening like? How do you see it?
I don't think I would always say the same thing. I mean, I'd start by saying, really, there is no awakening. There is only awake. And really, the truth is, and I do think this is this is kind of an absolute truth, although people disagree with me, that there isn't awake and asleep. So the whole notion, the whole concept of awakeness depends on knowing the difference, the opposite of being awake, which, you know, I wouldn't consider dream sleep, it's deep sleep. And I've had this discussion with a number of people, and they seem convinced that there is awareness in deep sleep. And I go, really? You know deep sleep? And I would say the awakeness is all there is. So there, in that sense, there is no awakening. So awakening is a misnomer in most senses of the word. How it's typically used is a misnomer. There is no awakening, because awakening would need one to awaken. And this is awakening to there is no one to awaken. So whether you want to call that awakening or not, I'm not sure. I guess I generally don't. I don't really use that word anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I probably
what do you use?
I usually say freedom or liberation.
Mm-hmm.
And liberation has the same problem with as awakening does as a word, because it needs one to be liberated. And what I speak of is there is no one to be liberated, there's just liberation. So life is fully liberated. And free is a better word, because liberated can only sound as though it's... And all of these words really can only be in contrast to how it used to be. And when it's undoubted that it used to be is just a story, and there actually isn't a how it used to be. There's a memory of how it used to be. There's thoughts of how it used to be. There's feelings about how it used to be. But used to be doesn't exist. Then, of course, all the words then have in one way, they're redundant in that they're useless, and they're actually misleading in some ways. But they're also liberated, because they don't really mean what they're typically taken to mean. And everyone says, well, why do you use the words? It's, well, you just sit alone in silence otherwise. You have to communicate with the language that we have. To speak non-dualistically, we would need a whole new language, and in fact, that wouldn't. I've heard people try and talk in a non-dualistic way, haven't you? And it's really dreadful. So I don't tend to use any. I don't know. No. So for example, I'd say I'm quite very comfortable saying me and you, even though there is no me and you, rather than saying body minds, which I remember lots of speakers I went to see always referred to human beings as body minds, or something similar. And it seemed, well, it just it seems really contrived and stilted, and I never enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's like if you look at the tree and you say, no, it's a trunk branches.
Yeah, it's like saying we can't call a tree anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all unnecessary.
Yeah. And it's true, you know, the language is, it cannot grasp it, it cannot describe it, it's just completely useless. But that's the only one we have.
But I find it all the more beautiful for that. It's not actually saying anything. And also I find the part of the liberation is for language, in that it can't. My seeking was about seeking the truth. And that's what died when it was seen that the truth couldn't be said. And in that sense, it can't be found, because it's all there is. If there is only truth, there is no finding the truth. And that's massively liberating for speaking, because then there's no concern about how accurate are these words in relation to the truth. Well, utterly inaccurate, because it's an impossibility of being precise about the truth. And so then words and language and communication generally, relationships generally, become much lighter and more playful, rather than the serious business, which it is for me, of making sure that I'm always speaking the truth, or as close to it as I can. Well, there is no closer to the truth.
Yeah. It's and like there is a surface layer. There is this deafening silence, and they don't touch each other.
No. Well, and yet, of course, they don't touch each other because they are each other.
Yeah.
I don't see the silence as separate from the noise.
Yeah.
So all the noise is silence, shouting. And yeah. So we can only speak about difference. That's all language does. Language is only comparative. It's dualistic in that it's comparing one extreme with the other. And yet every extreme, of course, if you go to extremes, then all extremes come around and then they meet each other the other side. There really isn't any difference. But we can only talk about difference. And I'm always trying to communicate what the sameness is, and people want to know, so what is it that's always the same? Mm-hmm. So in this world of ever changing, what is it that doesn't change? I mean, that's the quest for most people, really. Because then I would be able to rest. Well, there isn't actually a place. There isn't anything that's unchanging. It's nothing that's unchanging.
Yeah. And this is the beauty of this word, nothing, I think. Because it's one thing to see is that nothing, but that nothing is not an absence of anything.
No.
It literally is seeing that nothing that liberates all the constructs and all the whatever the castle is built on. Seeing that nothing.
Yeah. I don't know. I can sound a bit Buddhist sometimes because I love the word emptiness. So I often say emptiness rather than nothing. But of course, it's the few words that we have to point to what is it that isn't something.
Yeah. And sometimes I speak to people, I guide them, and then I say, look there. And they say, oh, there's nothing there. I don't see anything. I see nothing. But I say that's the thing to see, right? There's nothing. Look at it. Now really look at that nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah, they don't say emptiness though. This is kind of interesting what you mentioned. Nobody sees emptiness, they see nothing.
Absolutely not. There's no seeing of emptiness.
All right.
But for me, they're synonymous. Nothing and emptiness are synonymous to me, because you won't ever see nothing because there's nothing to see, and you won't ever see emptiness because it's empty. And then I have no idea how. It was just the emptiness was all pervasive and undeniable and outrageously obvious. And it's never been any different from when it was devastating initially, because I mean, if everything is empty, wherever you look, there is only emptiness. Then in effect, in my life, in my story, there was a real mourning for everything. A grief and a mourning for the loss of everything being what I thought it was, which was concrete and real. And now everything is equally real and unreal.
Could you share a little bit what happened in the story
What
for
happened in the
you?
story?
Yeah, what
Well,
happened? How did you were you a seeker? Did you go to
well, it's
meetings? What happened? How did that happen?
mm, see,
I,
I'm always loath to do this bit because you have to. I'm making it up. This is the truth now.
yeah,
You ask a question, and then there's a kind of searching through the memory banks of, okay, shall I include that? Shall I include that? What about that? And it's whatever is found. It's like, you're looking through a drawer and you're trying to find something and you just pick some random things out. And
yeah.
that's what I'm going to do now.
Yes. And this is beautiful to see it happening
I'm just going to
spontaneously right now.
just some random memories. I would say it was like a complete breakdown of self. There was despair, a lot of despair, a lot of inability to maintain myself. It seemed like I'd worked on myself for a long time, and then I wasn't able to. Hold on a second.
Now it's a
Storyteller.
new. Yeah, you open the drawer again and you see what else is there.
I was going to say, I was always a very inquisitive child, wanting to know. So I would always challenge every adult who said they knew how life was, what was going on. So I was brought up a Christian, but I was always challenging whatever I was told. I'd always ask questions like, well, how do you know that? Especially with belief.
Mm-hmm.
So I was always challenging belief. And you could say that non-duality is the ultimate challenge of belief because it actually challenges belief in self, which is the core belief. At the center of all beliefs is the one who needs to believe in something or feels the necessity of belief in order to feel grounded and solid, because there is no center and there isn't anything. So self is always in a state of constantly keeping itself real. And I couldn't. What seemed to happen in my story was that became more and more difficult to the point of impossibility. And then I really did fall into total despair.
Mm. And then
I had well, I'll go back a bit. This is literally picking random. They're not in any chronological order, these bits. I I had a profound awakening experience, what you might call a glimpse or an awakening, and it was life-changing. And I tried to ignore it. I was a PE teacher, and I was taking a group of 12-year-old children on a hike in Derbyshire in some hills. And we were walking, I was leading them up a hill, and it was wooded with rocks and the trees literally growing out of the rocks. Stunningly beautiful. And then there was this moment, which didn't even last a moment. It didn't last any time, when there was this undeniable, astounding knowing that the rocks and the trees and me were not two. I knew the rocks and the trees in an incredibly intimate way. I really was the rocks and the trees. But this is the thing as well, the rocks and the trees, they were me. And it was undoubted. And it didn't last any time. This is while I was walking. So it wasn't like a, a state that lasted, because a lot of people, when I spoke about it, they said, well, how long did it last? I said, it didn't last any time at all. I don't think it even lasted a fraction. It was not in time at all. It didn't. And so that set me off. I wanted to know what this was. Who else has had something similar? What did it mean? What was it? And so that set me off being what you might call a spiritual seeker from then on. It was when I was about 32. But then I gave up on it, and I tried to ignore it, but it wouldn't be ignored. I literally, you could say I went back to normal life, and I realized no one else was interested. Here's the thing. No one else is really interested in your story. I thought this was the most wonderful thing that had ever happened to me, genuinely, by a million miles. But compared with any other happening, this was so wonderful. I wanted to tell everyone. No one could even hear. I don't know. It was so dismissed. I told my closest friends, and I could tell they didn't even hear it. It was like, oh, whatever. Did they? And then I thought, well, there must be some people who'll be impressed if I tell them this. Because they'll have had similar experiences, and maybe because it was outside. If it's outside of your experience, then of course it doesn't mean anything. It was just like a momentary aberration of. So then I tried to find. So then I looked at Zen, and I looked at an advisor. I was teaching religious education at the time, and so I was teaching Hinduism, and then I found Advaita. So then I got excited, of course, because even when I saw that it just literally meant not to, I was so excited. It was the most exciting thing I'd ever discovered. Oh, because it made perfect sense. But then it was so wordy and it was so complex, it put me off. So I couldn't really study Advaita. It was far too. And I've always had there was still this worship. There was still this idea of lineage, and you have to learn, that there's something to learn. Well, what was seemed to be revealed in this experience was that there is nothing to be revealed. There can't be a revelation, because this is already, everything is revealed already. And so anything that then talked about path and how you might get there, they all felt distasteful. They all left a nasty flavor. I just didn't like the taste of them at all. But I was still trying to find I really wanted others who had had a similar experience, so that I didn't feel so alone. I will say, through all my seeking, the aloneness was a powerful motivation. That I felt, well, this is just me. And talking to people, one of the lovely things about doing non-duality talks and doing one-to-ones generally is that if this is seen, for want of a better word, then you can feel very alone, because your friends don't understand, your family doesn't understand, and you don't have anyone. And you can fear for your sanity. And there is a great self can be very terrified of insanity, of losing it. I felt that. At one point, I was close to being sectioned, which in the UK is, put in a psychiatric hospital against your will.
Oh, wow.
With
that sounds
despair.
Extreme.
It
With
was
despair.
extreme.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was at one point. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, because I was in such pain. When it came towards, you could say, the end, self became so desperate, almost desperate for survival, really. It was just because I think self is a survival. It's a self-survival instinct. Self is only about saving itself.
Okay, and what is the self you're talking about? Like,
I don't know. What is it? It's a felt sense of being.
it's a felt sense of being.
It's a felt sense of being inside.
Like inside
Not,
the
of
body.
not being out. Yeah. So, and I think different selves feel the locate. It's being located, really. It's a sense of really being located inside the body. And some selves, mostly introverts, have a sense that they live inside their head.
Oh yeah, behind the eyes.
Yeah, right here. That's the third eye. That's me. You know, this. I really think that's because that's where I reside. That's where self lives. But then for a lot of extroverts, they don't live in their heads. They live in their bodies. So then in the heart or in the solar plexus. I used to do this thing with kids where I'd ask them, can you point to yourself? Can you find yourself? Find yourself and show me where it is. And so a lot of the kids would do this.
Right.
But a lot of the kids would do this.
The heart.
Yeah. Or yeah, right, in the gut or the gut as well.
On the belly?
Some. Yeah.
How interesting.
But if you're a thinker, you know, I mean, I do think there's quite a clear distinction between those who prefer internal reality, selves who I studied psychology, so I still like it. And I trained as a therapist after I stopped teaching. And introverts find it hard to understand extroverts who don't really live in their head. And extroverts don't prioritize thinking in the way that introverts do. You know, thinking is higher for introverts, whereas for extroverts, feeling takes precedence. Feelings are superior to thought, whereas introverts generally think that, well, logic thinking. If you could think before you speak or think before you act, then everything would be better. So I think the conflict between human beings is often that conflict. Feeling versus, I mean, that's nothing to do with non-duality.
Yeah.
What else do you want in my story? So
what changed? What changed? Okay, there was this seeking, desperation, and then
I would say what changed was emptiness. The undeniable, ever-present, unmoving, unchanging. And that's what I was motivated to speak about. Silence, stillness, emptiness, nothing, no thing. So nothing stays the same. I really like that phrase. Nothing stays the same.
Yeah, literally.
That's one of my favorite phrases.
Nothing stays the same.
That could be a title for a book. I really like that because everything changes, nothing stays the same.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say there's non-duality. So dualistically, everything changes relatively. Absolutely, nothing doesn't change.
Now, if you take that word nothing and connect that to that, knowing, that's it.
And then wait a minute. So nothing and everything are not two. So Everything appears to change, but nothing changes. And amazingly, all that feels like love. It sounds very heady and wordy and maybe, you know, philosophical or spiritual, and yet I don't find it so at all. It feels completely natural.
Yeah, that sounds like liberation.
Yeah, that's what I might call it. But in a really, I was expecting, this is the other thing that I talk about quite a lot. This is not what I wanted. This is not what I expected liberation. You know, so you could say, so it sounds like liberation. Yeah, but it's not the liberation I had in mind that I'd fantasized about.
Right.
Because I thought liberation would make everything right. Well, there's no possibility of everything right when there's nothing wrong. So this isn't an answer that I think I speak about that a lot more now as well, that I know that as for a self is always looking to us for solutions to a problem, an answer. Well, if this is the answer, then this is the problem and the solution. That this is the question, this is the answer. there's nothing else. So whether there's questions, and in that, if this is both the question and the answer, then it's the end of bothering with questions.
The question dissolves.
The questions
Question falls away.
The questions don't come, they just don't appear anymore.
Yeah.
Because this is what is there to question? I can't question whether this is or not. So the question, the big question, is the one Shakespeare asked, which is to be or not to be. So am I or am I not? Well, if there is no knowing am from not, am not. If being and not being are not two, that's, you know, for me, that would be the ultimate question. So is this or is this not? And the answer is yes. This is, and this is not. And when the answer to all, so, and that's the ultimate question, and the answer to the ultimate question is yes. Well, that's the end of questions.
Oh, wonderful, Tim. You know, from a seeker's perspective, or what you call the selves perspective,
Yeah.
this is just words. Means nothing. Like, why so many words about nothing?
Get that.
And these seekers know there has to be a shift. They're looking for a shift. And that shift has to come with some kind of confirmation or some kind of definite experience, energetic experience, or something has to happen. And they're waiting for that something to happen is the torment.
Oh, yeah.
Nothing happens.
I mean, I do feel qualified.
Yes.
You know, if you felt the torment, so when I'm speaking to people who are still looking, my qualification for speaking about it is I know how I haven't forgotten. I mean, fortunately, I mean, none of it ever happened, but I have a very strong memory of how it felt to be me and how painful it was. So I think that's the only qualification you need. So the only qualification you need to speak about this is to have suffered. And
everyone has suffered.
Absolutely.
Do you know anyone who hasn't suffered?
No, of course not. That enjoys is wrong, but self is quite happy with suffering because I feel very alive. I feel very real when I'm suffering. I think the problem with suffering for self is that self doesn't want to get rid of suffering, really. The human being wants to be rid of suffering. Self is really content with suffering, because in suffering, I'm very solid. I'm very existent. Probably more existent than in happiness. I mean, joy, there is existence, but joy is sort of open and free, whereas pain and suffering, particularly self, and not just pain of poor me, but actually how dreadful I am, self-loathing and self-hatred. Self will take that all day long, because I feel very solid and real in. So I've got a really weak self, I've got a poor self, I've got a faulty self.
Not deserving, not enough.
Always not. Well, the whole nature of, you could say what self is the feeling of not enough.
Ah, nice, yeah.
Really, I mean,
not
there's
enough.
Not enough, never enough, no. And because, well, there'll be fleeting, I mean, I remember this, the sense of when you get something that you've longed for as self, I mean, how long does that last? It's so short.
Till the next breath.
And then
like, now I got this, what's next?
Right, I've got that, so what now? Yeah. What do I do next? What do I need now?
Something's missing.
The liberation is that there isn't really there's no need. There's no need, but then all the needs are okay. Because of course there are physical needs. Food and comfort, and warmth and shelter, and I would say basic animal needs. And basic animal needs include what we would call relational love, because we're just mammals. I really do see human beings as animals. I've always loved animals. And if every human being just saw, when they were walking around, they just saw other human beings like a dog sees other dogs. If that was possible, of course it's not, because we're not dogs. But you know how some dogs, they meet each other and they love immediately. They really like each other, and they play and they sniff each other's bums, and and they really, there's joy. And then they meet another dog, and you can just see the heckles rise up, and they're very wary of that dog. Well, I have that. I don't know if you do, but I have that with human beings. I meet human beings, and immediately I have a sense of, I'm not going near him. We still have the thing about us, because we're so wrapped in thought. Thought seems to, for most human beings, override natural instinctual behavior, which is, we nearly always know when we don't really want to get to know another human being, and we have a bad feeling about it. I tend to be very instinctual these days. I mean, I don't mean I start growling at people. Well, I might do, but I do walk away if I don't feel comfortable. This doesn't feel comfortable. I don't need a reason. I don't need to work it out. It's just walk away, just like any other animal would do. And that feels good. Life's incredibly easy. I mean, you could really say effortless. Because actual effort doesn't really take effort. Effort is only, for me, this trying. I mean, whether you're physically doing something or not. I don't mean extremes like running a marathon, but just generally day to day living as a human being is really effortless. You don't have
the next thing to do. Now do this. Now I'm here doing this. Now I'm here doing this. Now I need to take care of this.
It's much easier than I would have ever dreamt of. Easier, but not better, because the ideas I had of better were always, there wouldn't be any sadness, there wouldn't be any sorrow, there wouldn't be any anger. Or I would, I would be at total peace. There would be everything just appears spontaneously. I don't know what the next moment will be at all, and no one does.
Yeah,
And
I just thought I was gonna sneeze, but it didn't come. So
that's good. Yeah. Everyone knows they have no control over sneezing.
it was coming, but it didn't come. Can't even know that.
Well,
It's so easy. You don't need to plan ahead or think about what to say. When something comes to say, it comes to say, and it's just being said.
yeah.
It's like more space for everything to just flow freely without, it needs to look like this. Or sitting in silence for 2.5 seconds too long, or what people are going to think.
Yeah.
It's none of that.
No, not being afraid of silence is a big thing. I mean, particularly for someone like me, it's a very extrovert character. I would always try and fill the silence because silence was threatening. I might not exist in the silence. Where am I in the silence? I don't know. But the silence and the words are not two. All the words are silent. They don't mean anything. Nothing means anything. And then there's meaning. The meaning is liberated from being meaningful. Relationships are liberated from being meaningful relationships. Relationships are a lot easier when there's no one in relationship. I mean, absolutely, there's no relationships because it needs two selves to be in relationship.
Right.
And
so what happens if there's, like, let's say, somebody like you, and then there is somebody who is completely in selfing, just no awareness at all of anything else possible, complete identification. So what's happening there?
It's perfectly fine because it couldn't be any other way. So, somebody said to me the other day, a while ago, I've had it more than once. They say, well, because you're empty. Oh no, I think they said an empty, as opposed to a self. You're an empty, a no self. And I went, no. I said, no, there's no self without self. So selves any more than you do. But what you suffer from is you see a human being and you say, there's a self inside that human being who is running that human being. And that's how selves live. So self lives in, I'm running this human being, and I meet another one, and I want to know who is it that's running that one. And I can get to know them, and I need to get to know them as well in order to feel comfortable around them. Because whilst I'm in a state of not knowing, they're dangerous. So there's always that, getting to know you. Well, the wonder is I can't get to know you because there's no one to get to know. I can't know you, and no one has ever known another. And I just think it doesn't sound like love, but that's much more unconditional. Because you think about the conditions we have on relationships. So our close relationships are the ones we believe, and it is just an illusory belief that we know them.
Mm.
We know their self. I know
Yeah.
you. Well, I can't know you. So I will say I make much less effort to get to know people anymore. Well, there's nothing in it for me. If you think about why you get to know someone, you get to know someone so you feel more comfortable with them and safer and less alone.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that one thing that I maybe talk about that's most seekers don't want to hear is that this is completely alone. The total aloneness, the absolute aloneness of not two.
Yeah, that's true. This is not something that people like to hear.
No, because that's not, I don't know anyone who's seeking that.
No, but then I exchange word aloneness to solitude and kind of sounds sweet.
Absolutely.
Solitude.
Yeah, because the silence, I mean, you can't get more alone than nothing.
Right.
You can't get more alone than silence. You can't get more alone than unmoving, unchanging. And there was a period of where there was a lot of grief for everyone that I'd known, because it was undoubted that that was an illusion, that I never knew another. So I never knew my mother. I knew of my mother. I knew how I still know. And the thing is, although my parents have died, I still know my parents exactly the same as I've ever known them, because all that I ever had of them was the feelings I have for them and the memories of times we shared together. That's it. And that's all it ever was. And so I kind of get it in a really natural way, that when someone dies that you love, you don't lose anything that you ever had of them, because you never had anything of them. And whatever you had of the relationship, that remains, other than their physical appearance, that doesn't. But everything else is exactly the same.
The relationship, the love, the images and memories are same, whether somebody is alive or not.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so the love, I mean, the love remains exactly the same. In fact, you might say it's more so when they're not physically present. Could be. I do love a love story still. We only have stories to tell each other, and that's all
It's a
we ever do.
storyland. Welcome to Earth. It's a storyland. Like Disneyland, it's a storyland.
It's just all stories. Lovely. Someone said to me, I have it quite often. Well, it's okay for you because you're not living in the story anymore.
Aha.
So here's a sort of a myth of
Mm-hmm.
awakening. And I go, well, you could say, so you mean that I don't tell any stories. So there's no stories. And they go, yeah, because you're not telling any stories about it. You're just living in the moment, in the present, in the now, and there are no stories. I went, well, what do you think we're doing now when we're speaking? This is only storytelling. You tell me a story, I tell you a story, and we share stories. And then we create a shared story. It's nothing else.
No escape.
No. I mean, wonderfully, no. That, again, that's one of the reasons that I always say that this is not what you want. Because most seeking is an escape plan.
Yeah. Seeking
This
for
is
something, running away from uncomfortableness,
yeah. So
not enoughness.
self has two basic tactics to feel better.
Uh-huh.
One towards what will running towards what will make me better, and hiding from what makes me feel threatened or sad.
Mm.
Hiding and running, and most selves have a preferred, some selves are mainly runners and some selves are mainly hiders, but everyone does a bit of both.
Mm-hmm.
But there's nothing, so the liberation is there's nothing to run towards. There's no next.
But
There's
nobody
nothing.
wants to hear that.
No, that's why I'm not very popular. But the popular, that's the unpopular bit. The popular bit is there's nothing that needs to be hidden from, because that's the liberation.
Mm-hmm.
Now selves love to hear that. What you're saying, there will be no need for me to hide from anything. No, there's nothing to be hidden from. This is completely open. And the hiding, if you hide from it, it's a pretense. It's still fully present. There's no escape simply because there's nothing else. But most seekers don't want to hear that there's nowhere to get to.
So that magical shift that is somewhere dangling out there is not coming.
Well, that's what I say. And now, if you're still offering a shift, then you tend to get more people interested because, of course, you might be able to help them do it. And of course, if I there's it's not that there isn't a shift, but of course there isn't a shift.
I think it's not what it's imagined. The shift is from running away to coming home.
It's just
to noticing that everything is already here. That's the shift.
If you do come home, it's obvious that you never left. I mean, it's really cliched. I love them. There's who's the poet? T.S. Eliot. And at the end of all our seeking, we come to the place and realize that we never left, or something. That's a paraphrase. But I remember I read that at school for A-level English. And I just, it's funny because I don't know, it seems like if there's, the human being has this sense of being a seeker, of looking for, then it's always there. And I really have a sense of, when in the story, when did this begin? Well, it began when I started speaking. I was always looking. There can be some disappointment in this.
I think it's a good sign when there's a disappointment.
I would say, yeah. I said the bet. If you're on the right path, then there will be frustration, disappointment, and despair, apathy,
hopelessness,
meaninglessness. And this I feel dreadful because they're all the things that self is very afraid of. And of course, fear. I'd be amazed. I know I have heard stories of people who come to this, you could say, no one comes to this, but, or there is an awakening. And they say that there was no fear. I went, really? I'm amazed. Because this is, I mean, if you're gonna be left with nothing to do, it will feel like you're dying. I mean, there is wonderful news. You're not dying. There's no one to die.
Yes.
This is death. Death is, because there isn't anywhere else, the death is ever present. The death's not waiting in the future. There's no grim reaper hiding around the corner waiting to get you.
Mm.
There's no death to come. Death is everywhere. If you're awake, you see death everywhere. Self is always turning his face away from death because it doesn't want to look at it. And by death, I mean nothing, non-existence. So what self always is looking for is existence. So the tree exists. And then we ignore the fact that there's the leaves, it's dying. All the leaves are falling, dying and rotting on the ground. And that's beautifully alive, that dying. So perhaps the greatest duality is life and death, and there is no separation between life and death. Just stories of separation. You know, the point. Really? I mean, simply, there's no separation. That we can't, there's no knowing, there's no telling where this begins and this ends. This is always beginning and always ending. And self lives in this illusory space in between birth and death. That there is this space between where, and that's where I exist. Well, when there's no space between, there's no space for you to exist. It's just everything.
Thank you, Tim.
Oh, thank you. It's been a pleasure. I spoke to a friend yesterday and said I was meeting you, and she said, "Oh, Ilona, I think there'll be a lot of silence." And I said, "Well, not with me there, because I talk non-stop." And that's more or less what's happened. I love speaking about this because it is an odd thing to speak about this because it is worthless and it is futile and it is and yet it feels like love.
Then it's not worthless or futile.
It feels, no, when I said it's futile for the seeker, it's futile in this will get you somewhere. So I just mean it in that sense. It's not futile in terms of compassion and love. No, at all, not at all. The motivation to speak about this is compassion. It's love. Yeah.
That's why I keep going for 13 years now, non-stop.
Oh, brilliant. No, it's lovely.
Yeah, well, people are seeking. How can they end this seeking if nobody points them home?
No.
Somebody has to.
Well, yes, a beautiful thing. You don't, the thing about pointing home is you don't know which direction to point.
Oh, it's always look for yourself. It's always there. Look for yourself. That's the only direction.
Is that a pointer? I went, yeah, but it'll have to point in all directions.
What's already here?
Yeah.
Not out there, not in imagination. What is already here?
Yeah.
Because as you say, the self is looking out.
Yeah.
Somebody has it.
And you say turn, and then of course a lot of the seeking I did, because I was always looking out, being an extrovert particularly, it must be out there somewhere. the truth. And then they said, no, turn 180 degrees and look back at what's looking. You know, headless way, Douglas,
yeah.
and stuff. And I went, but of course, I get the principle, and it is quite easy to see. I think using those sort of methods, it's quite easy to see that there's nothing looking, because you can't find what's looking. It's just empty. There's just space. And that's okay to a degree, but it's no good if everything else is outside is just the same, and it's, and off I go. I'm still the seeker seeking outside in a world that really exists, and where I can find the truth. And the liberation for me was that everything, this emptiness was obvious. So inside was empty, so that I couldn't find myself. So I could I could imagine that I'm doing that I was looking inside and didn't find anything. And that was liberating to a degree, but also that was when despair set in, because myself was screaming, did scream, you don't make me non-existent. What will I be? What will I be? I need. So myself seemed to hang on for dear life. And of course, fear is powerful, a powerful weapon to hang on. But what really shifted was when it was undeniable that everything outside was empty. So it's empty. and look, it's empty.
What does it say on your mug? Oh, that's beautiful.
That's from my boys for Father's Day. I know, so lovely.
Very sweet.
Yeah, I'm very lucky. I've got my beautiful boys to play with. Well, thanks very much. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely. Thank you, Tim. And how can people find you if they want to speak to you?
So, yeah, I haven't been doing many live meetings lately, but I do a Zoom every Thursday at 7 p.m. British time. Anyone.
Every Thursday, that's a lot.
I've done every Thursday for 5 years.
Wow.
Apparently. I know. I can't believe it. I look and I'm like, wow, there's 200 videos on YouTube. So you can find me on YouTube. All my talks are on there. My website is called This Deafening Silence. timclissthis.com.
I'll put it all neatly in the description.
Okay. And yeah, so my books, I've got a new book coming out hopefully in a week or so, which it's a different kind of book. It's more traditional non-duality book. It's transcripts from my talks in Copenhagen, first time I went there. So it's questions and answers. What else? That's about it. Oh yeah, and if you want to come to the meetings, all the details are all on my website. And I post on Facebook, Tim Cliss Non-Duality.
Yes.
Pretty much every day. Not always, but a lot, yeah, mostly. If a thought comes up, I just write it down.
Well, it's nice to have a thought a day.
I like it because then I don't think about it anymore. And I like taking photographs, and so I'm always posting a photograph that I've taken on the same day, usually.
Well, that's so beautiful, Tim. Thank you so much for sharing your presence.
Oh no, it's been a pleasure.
Lovely. Your emptiness and silence. that is just radiating out. And thank you everyone for watching and listening. And if you like this video, press like, comment, or share. You know the drill. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I'll
Oh,
see
it's
you next
brilliant.
time.
Take
Bye
care.
for now.
Bye-bye.